The engine of the old pickup truck rumbled down a lonely back road, its sound loud and grating, as if trying to smother the heavy silence between father and son. In the back seat, Jake sat stiffly, clutching his small dog Lucy, his golden and white Sheltie, against his chest. His cheeks were stained with tears, his eyes swollen from crying for hours. Lucy, sensing his pain but not understanding it, nuzzled into him and licked his face gently, the same way she always did when he was upset. But this time felt different. Jake could barely breathe through the lump in his throat. Deep down, he knew what this trip meant. They weren't going for a ride. This was goodbye, and there was nothing he could do to change it. Ethan, Jake's father, gripped the steering wheel with both hands. His knuckles were white, his eyes locked on the road like it was his only escape from what he was about to do. He hadn't said much since they left home, just a few half-hearted explanations Jake had stopped listening to. At 45, Ethan's face was weathered with lines from years of working dead-end jobs and struggling to pay bills, but today he looked older than ever. "Jake, we've talked about this," he finally muttered, his voice hoarse and hollow. But Jake wasn't having it. "No, you talked," the boy snapped, his voice cracking from emotion. "You don't get it. She's my best friend. She's my only friend. Why are you doing this to us?" Ethan didn't answer. The silence that followed was louder than any explanation he could have given. As the truck slowed to a stop in a clearing surrounded by tall, silent pines, the stillness felt unbearable, like even the trees were mourning what was about to happen. Ethan stepped out first and opened the back door, but Jake recoiled, shielding Lucy like a knight guarding treasure. "No, Dad. Please. Don't do this. I'll do anything," he pleaded, voice shaking. But Ethan's expression didn't change. Without meeting his son's eyes, he gently reached for Lucy and placed her on the ground beside a small bowl of water and the pink blanket she slept with every night. Lucy looked up at him confused, then at Jake, as if asking what was going on. Jake screamed when the truck started moving again. "Dad, no! Stop the car!" "We can't just leave her here." But the engine only got louder, drowning out his cries. From the back window, Jake watched Lucy chase after them, her little legs scrambling to keep up. She ran until the dust swallowed her whole. And in that moment, as she disappeared into the blur of trees and silence, Jake felt something inside him break in a way that could never be fixed. Lucy stood in the middle of the dusty road, panting, her small paws aching from the sprint. The truck had vanished into the horizon, but she kept her eyes locked on the direction it had gone, as if by sheer will she could summon Jake back. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her ears twitching at every sound wind in the trees, a bird taking flight, distant rustles she didn't recognize. She let out a soft bark, hopeful, confused. But no one answered. The forest around her, once filled with curious smells and playful adventures, now felt like a stranger. The cold breeze ruffled her fur, and for the first time Lucy felt truly alone, but something in her refused to stay still. She put her nose to the ground, sniffing the lingering scent of oil, dust, and something warmer, Jake. That was all she needed. She took a hesitant step forward, then another. Her instincts weren't perfect, but her heart was certain. She had to find her boy. The forest grew darker as Lucy ventured deeper in. The tall trees seemed to press closer together, their branches whispering secrets in the wind. Every snap of a twig or flutter of leaves sent a jolt of fear through her small body. Her legs were already sore, and the terrain grew harder, twisted roots, damp leaves, and muddy patches that clung to her fur. Still, she pressed on. Every now and then, she caught a faint trace of Jake's scent, familiar, comforting, and painfully distant. That smell kept her going, even when her paws started to bleed from the sharp rocks and branches littering the path. At one point, she stumbled over a fallen limb and whimpered as she hit the ground, staying there for a moment, breathing hard. The temptation to give up crept in like the cold air wrapping around her. But when she lifted her head and caught another faint whiff of Jake, her spirit reignited. She pushed herself up, determined. Even as her muscles screamed for rest, her soul screamed louder. Jake needed her. Just as she found the strength to keep moving, a sound behind her made Lucy freeze. It wasn't the gentle rustling of trees or the scamper of a squirrel. It was heavier, measured footsteps, slow and deliberate. She turned, ears perked, nose twitching. Her eyes scanned the dark spaces between the trees. Then she saw them, two glowing eyes, low and steady, watching from the shadows. Her body tensed. The figure stepped forward slightly, revealing a large, thin coyote with sharp teeth and hunger in its gaze. Lucy let out a low growl, more out of fear than bravery. Her tail was tucked tight, her body trembling, but she stood her ground. When the creature crept closer, the tension snapped and Lucy bolted. Her small body dodged trees and jumped over roots, her mind focused on one thing: run. She didn't look back, didn't slow down. Jake's scent had nearly disappeared, but the hope of finding him kept her feet moving. This wasn't just about survival. It was about loyalty. No matter how lost, how tired, or how scared, Lucy would not give up. She had already been left once, and she would never let that be the end of her story. Inside the truck, Jake sat stiffly, his body pressed against the window as trees and shadows raced by in a blur. His mind wasn't on the road or anything his father had said. He was trapped in the memory of Lucy's face, the confusion in her eyes as she watched them leave her behind. It played over and over again like a cruel loop, and each time it hit harder. He could still hear her bark, that desperate sound, like she was begging him to stay. He closed his eyes and leaned his forehead against the cool glass, wishing he could turn back time. "Dad," he said suddenly, his voice almost lost in the hum of the engine. "Did you know she waits for me by the door every day when I get home from school?" Ethan didn't reply, just stared straight ahead, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "She sleeps by my bed every night," Jake continued, his voice cracking, "like she's guarding me or something. And now she probably thinks I left her on purpose." He wiped at his eyes, his chest tightening with a guilt so heavy it hurt to breathe. Ethan tried to swallow the lump forming in his throat, but Jake's words cut deeper than he expected. He'd always seen Lucy as just a pet, something extra they couldn't afford anymore. But hearing his son speak that way, like Lucy was a part of him, shook something loose inside him. "Jake," he said softly, trying to find the right words. "She's strong. Dogs. They have instincts. She'll find her way." But his voice faltered halfway through. He didn't believe it himself. Jake turned and looked at him, eyes full of pain and disbelief. "You don't get it," he said quietly. "She's not like other dogs. She's never hunted. She's never slept outside. She doesn't know how to survive out there. And now she thinks I abandoned her." That last part hit Ethan the hardest. He'd told himself this was a necessary choice, something they had to do to survive, but in that moment, he realized that survival meant nothing if it tore your family apart. And Lucy, like it or not, was family. The silence hung heavy for several more miles before Jake suddenly sat up straighter. Something in him shifted in urgency, a fire. He turned to his father, voice shaking but firm. "We have to go back," he said. "We have to." Ethan's eyes flicked toward him in the mirror, startled. "Jake." He started, but his son didn't let him finish. "No, you don't understand. She won't make it out there. And even if she does, she'll think I gave up on her. She trusted me. She trusted us." Jake leaned forward, desperation taking over. "We can't leave her like that. Please, Dad. Please." Ethan looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw a boy ready to fight for what he loved. He didn't see a child begging. He saw someone with more loyalty and heart than most grown men he knew. The guilt, the doubt, the weight of what he'd done it all came crashing in. Without another word, he pulled the truck over to the side of the road. The engine idled in the silence. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan exhaled slowly, the sound almost a whisper. "Okay," he said. "We'll go back." And in that quiet agreement, everything changed. The forest was dark now, the kind of dark that felt thick, almost alive. Lucy's paws throbbed from the endless running, her tiny body shaking with every breath, but she didn't stop. The night air bit through her fur, and the unfamiliar sounds of the woods felt louder, more threatening with every step. She limped forward, ears twitching, still trying to follow the last faint trace of Jake's scent, though it had nearly vanished. Her heartbeat pounded against her ribs like a drum. Then, from behind, that low growl returned, deep, threatening, unmistakable. She froze, turned, and there it was, again, those same glowing eyes cutting through the dark. The coyote, thinner now in the moonlight, its ribs visible beneath its fur, its gaze locked on her. Lucy tried to bark to scare it off, but her voice cracked, weak from exhaustion and fear. The creature stepped forward slowly, its teeth bared. She took a step back, her tail tucked tightly, knowing she couldn't run anymore. Her legs wouldn't carry her far. The forest fell silent except for her labored breathing. It was just her, the darkness, and the predator closing in. Just as the coyote crouched, ready to pounce, a sudden roar tore through the night, the rumble of an engine, headlights blazing through the trees. Lucy blinked against the light, her ears perking. The coyote hesitated, startled by the sound, then snarled before slinking back into the shadows, disappearing as silently as it had come. Lucy stood frozen, unsure if she was imagining it, until she heard something even more familiar than the engine, the sound of Jake's voice, calling her name through the open window. Her eyes lit up, even though her legs ached and every part of her body begged her to rest. She started running again, toward the lights, toward that voice. Each step was a battle. Her paws scraped and raw, but she pushed forward. She stumbled once, tripping over a root, but she got up quickly, driven by something stronger than pain. Jake was here. He'd come back. That was all that mattered. Her breaths came in short gasps, but she didn't stop. Not until she saw the truck's shape through the trees, and the boy she loved standing just outside of it. Jake's heart felt like it would burst when he saw the small, staggering figure emerge from the shadows. "It's her!" he shouted, and before the truck had fully stopped, he flung the door open and ran toward her. Lucy let out a soft, broken bark, her legs wobbling beneath her. She managed a few more steps before collapsing onto the road, too tired to go any farther. Jake dropped to his knees and scooped her into his arms, tears streaming freely. "I found you, Lucy," he whispered through his sobs. "I found you." She nuzzled into his chest, her little tail giving a tired wag as she licked his face with what little strength she had left. Ethan stood by the truck, watching the scene unfold, guilt and sorrow washing over him. He had almost cost his son everything. Slowly, he walked over and knelt beside them. Jake looked up, eyes red but fierce. "Never again, Dad," he said firmly. "Never ask me to leave her again. She's my family." Ethan's voice caught in his throat as he nodded, brushing a hand gently over Lucy's head. He knew Jake was right, and deep down, he knew that from now on, everything had to change. Back at home, the house felt different. The walls were the same, the creaky floors hadn't changed, but something about the air was lighter, like the weight of the last few days had started to lift. Jake sat on the living room floor, Lucy curled up in his lap, wrapped in the pink blanket that had somehow made its way back to her. She was still weak, her breathing soft and steady, but her tail thumped gently against his leg every now and then. He stroked her fur carefully, not wanting to disturb her rest. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching silently, unsure of what to say or how to make up for the pain he'd caused. For the first time in a long while, he really saw his son not just the small boy who needed protection, but someone full of heart and conviction, someone who had fought for something when even Ethan had given up. Jake looked up briefly and whispered, "Thanks for coming back, Dad." The words weren't filled with warmth, but there was no anger either, just exhaustion and something closer to hope. The next morning came quietly, sunlight filtering through the thin curtains of Jake's room. Lucy lay at the foot of the bed, head resting on her front paws. When she heard Jake stir, she lifted her head, her tired eyes meeting his with that same unconditional love. Jake smiled sleepily and reached out to pet her, his fingers brushing gently over her ears. Downstairs, Ethan was in the kitchen, the smell of toast and coffee drifting through the small house. He stared blankly at the clock on the wall, the quiet ticking louder than usual. It had been a long time since he'd sat in that kitchen without worrying about where his next paycheck would come from. But now, something inside him told him that maybe his priorities had been off. Maybe keeping the lights on meant nothing if he lost the people he was doing it for. A few minutes later, Jake walked in, Lucy trotting softly behind him. The boy pulled out a chair and sat at the table, serious in a way that didn't match his age. "Dad," he said, arms crossed, "we need to talk about Lucy." Jake didn't waste time. His voice was steady, like he had rehearsed it in his head 100 times. "I know things are hard," he said. "I know taking care of her costs money, and I know you're doing your best. But I can help too. I mow lawns, wash cars, walk other people's dogs, whatever it takes." Ethan looked at him, caught off guard by the maturity in his son's words. Jake wasn't just asking to keep Lucy, he was offering to carry part of the burden. Lucy sat beside him quietly, as if understanding every word, her eyes never leaving Ethan. The silence lingered before Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. "Jake, you shouldn't have to worry about this stuff. You're just a kid." But Jake shook his head. "Lucy would do anything for me, Dad. She chased our truck through the woods. She almost died because I left her. I have to show her I'd do anything for her too." The room went still. Ethan looked at both of them, his son with fire in his heart, and the little dog who had fought so hard just to be by his side. And for the first time in what felt like years, Ethan made a quiet decision. No matter what it took, he would never risk breaking that bond again. In the days that followed, something changed in the rhythm of their little home. Jake, now fueled by a fierce sense of purpose, spent hours brainstorming ways to help provide for Lucy. He scribbled ideas onto torn pieces of paper: dog walking, lemonade stands, fixing bikes, anything. Ethan watched from the kitchen, coffee in hand, as his son worked with Lucy curled up beside him like a loyal assistant. It was hard not to feel a pang of guilt watching Jake take on responsibilities no kid should have to carry. One afternoon, Ethan sat beside his son and looked over the scrawled notes and crooked drawings. "You're a special kid," he said softly. "More than I ever deserved." Jake smiled a little and shrugged. "We're a team, right?" Ethan nodded, this time with no hesitation. That night, Ethan picked up a few extra shifts at the local hardware store, while Jake started offering services around the neighborhood, always with Lucy trotting beside him, tail wagging. Word spread quickly about the boy and his little dog who had been left in the woods and fought to find her way home. Their bond began to touch others, and slowly, the family's world started to shift. Still, it wasn't easy. One morning, Ethan received a letter at work, a formal eviction notice. The unpaid rent had finally caught up to them. He sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, the weight of failure pressing down hard. When Jake came in and read the letter, his face fell, but he didn't break. "We'll figure something out," he said firmly, Lucy at his side as always. Together, they went door to door, asking neighbors for work. Some offered small jobs, others, touched by the story, gave food, supplies, even small donations. On Saturday, they held a yard sale, with Lucy running between visitors in a bright scarf, drawing smiles from everyone. By the end of the day, they hadn't raised enough to clear the debt, but they had raised something even more valuable: hope. People weren't just helping out of pity. They believed in Jake and Lucy. They believed in their love. And then, as if the universe had been watching all along, something completely unexpected happened. A man pulled up in a sleek black car, introduced himself as Robert Hughes, the owner of a major pet products company, and said he'd heard their story. "We're launching a campaign about the bond between people and their pets," he explained. "And we think you and Lucy would be perfect." The offer felt like a dream. Within days, Jake and Lucy were on set, shooting a commercial that would go viral, telling their story through soft music, warm lighting, and real, raw love. The response was overwhelming. People from across the country reached out, moved by the image of a boy who refused to give up on his dog and a dog who risked everything just to find her way back to him. The money they earned helped pay off the family's debts, but more importantly, it gave them peace, something they hadn't felt in years. Lucy was no longer a burden. She was their miracle, and through it all, she stayed the same sweet, gentle dog, never far from Jake's side. But beyond the happy ending, this story is a reflection of something real. In a world where everything moves fast, where responsibilities pile up and kindness is often the first thing to go, Jake and Lucy remind us what truly matters: loyalty, love. The promise that family, in whatever form it takes, is worth fighting for. Whether it's a dog you rescued or a child you're trying to protect, never forget, the bonds we build in love are stronger than any struggle life throws at us. The weeks following the commercial's release brought more change than Jake had ever imagined. What started as a single video turned into an entire campaign, with his and Lucy's faces showing up on posters, in magazine articles, and even TV interviews. People everywhere were touched by their bond, by the loyalty of a dog who would run through the woods just to find the boy she loved, and the strength of a kid who refused to let her go. At school, Jake, who once sat quietly at the back of the class, now had kids coming up to him saying things like, "Hey, you're the one with the dog from that video. He didn't love the attention, but he did love being able to talk about Lucy." Meanwhile, Ethan received letters and messages from strangers thanking him for giving his son and dog another chance. He didn't always know how to respond, but deep down, something was healing in him too, a wound he didn't even realize he'd carried for years. There was pride now, not just guilt. Pride in Jake, in Lucy, and in the fact that maybe for the first time in his life, he hadn't run away from what mattered. But even as the spotlight grew brighter, Jake and Ethan tried to keep life simple at home. The campaign money helped them pay off debts and buy groceries without stress, but they didn't let it change who they were. Jake still did chores and helped neighbors, and Lucy still followed him everywhere, whether it was down the street to buy milk or just out to the yard to sit under the old tree they both loved. Ethan, in a quiet but steady way, became more present. He made dinner when he got home from work. He asked Jake about school. Sometimes they'd all pile onto the couch, father, son, and dog, watching old movies in the soft glow of the TV. It wasn't about being perfect. They still had hard days. Sometimes the water heater broke or the fridge was nearly empty before the next paycheck. But now they faced those moments together. And each time they looked at Lucy curled up between them, they were reminded of how close they had come to losing something that couldn't be replaced. That awareness made the ordinary moments feel sacred. One night, while sitting outside watching Lucy chase fireflies in the yard, Jake turned to his dad and asked quietly, "Do you think everything happens for a reason?" Ethan looked at his son, surprised by the question. For a while, he didn't answer. He just watched Lucy dart back and forth through the grass, her little paws barely making a sound. "I don't know," he finally said, "but I think sometimes even the bad stuff can lead you to something good, if you don't give up." Jake nodded, not saying anything more, but the look in his eyes said he understood. That moment, under a quiet sky, captured something the commercial never could. It wasn't just about a dog who found her way back. It was about a family rebuilding itself one choice at a time. And for anyone watching their story from the outside, it was a powerful reminder that love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. In a world where people so easily walk away from hard things, Lucy taught them what it meant to stay.